I'm your host, Marie, and we are joined today by Luke Sniewski. He did his PhD research on a topic that I found quite fascinating. It's mindfulness as a treatment for self-perceived problematic pornography usage. What made you want to study pornography use?
PhD research is often called PhD me search. My sort of dissertation, my doctoral research really combined two of the things that I was interested in. Firstly, pornography, because I had my own journey through self-perceived problematic pornography use. Porn addiction doesn't really exist in the literature as a formal diagnosis, but I think the relationship that we have with behaviors, and certainly the relationship that I had with porn, was problematic for me in the way that it was impacting my life. And one of the key interventions or tools that I had used to remove myself, or I suppose move away from the habit, from the consumption, was mindfulness, was meditation, specifically was stillness, right? So stillness is the way that I've conceptualized and the way I describe the process of meditation. So my research allowed me to do two things: go look more deeply into the phenomenon of problematic porn use, but also look more deeply into the practice of meditation, whilst at the same time getting to share that experience with other men. And as we all know, men find it difficult to talk about mental health challenges, and certainly when something like porn is attached to it, which has stigma and shame. So it makes it even harder to open up about that sort of topic. So while it wasn't intentional, one of the consequences was that my research was almost therapeutic in and of itself. The interviews, the interactions, and the conversations with these men that were participants, it was the first time that many of them actually spoke to anybody openly and honestly about their porn use. So it was a gift in many different ways.
But why do you think people are so closed off and hesitant? Why is there so much stigma when I would be surprised if there's anyone over the age of probably not even appropriate age to be watching it who hasn't viewed pornography?
I would say it's probably a multi-variable reason for that. And of course, it's going to be individual and contextual based on the person. But I would say a big influence is going to be religion. So when people grow up in religious contexts and pornography is shunned or rejected or being communicated that it is a sin to view, then that's one of the earlier imprints on our nervous system and our psyche that if we engage in this behavior, it's going to make you unlovable in God's eyes. You know, this was one of the reasons that one of the participants actually shared as to why they found had such a problematic relationship with porn that every time they viewed, they almost felt themselves being rejected by God. Another reason might be the lack of comprehensive, rigorous, and authentic sexual education in school. So kids are growing up and it becomes this conversation that no one wants to have and no one wants to talk about. And because everyone's avoiding the conversation and the topic and the education is not there, then all of a sudden there's this unintentional imprint that this is something we don't talk about. We don't talk about our sexuality, we don't talk about our bodies, we don't talk about our sexual organs, we don't talk about sex in general. And I think that leaves a lasting imprint into how we actually communicate about these issues moving forward. The third reason might be those that do sort of discover or gain the insight or reflect, those that do reflect and find that porn is a challenging or problematic behavior in their own life, that for them, they're going to find it difficult to talk about it because there's already shame and guilt attached to that. There's already negative emotions attached to that. So to go into those vulnerable expressions of emotions is going to be an added degree of difficulty. And again, I also do want to add, this is especially so for men. And the modern day, what it means to be a man, masculinity in modern day it comes with its challenges, the common notions of sucking it up and gritting your teeth and getting through it and not showing any emotions and not crying or showing that aspect of our emotional selves.
You mentioned religion and just the fact that it's not really talked about a lot in our society, which is kind of ironic because it is so out there all over the place. It's women's bodies especially, but also men's, but women's bodies are just put out there for everyone to see, sexualized, that women are sexualized at younger and younger than ever before, and yet it's still kind of beneath the surface. We don't talk about it. Why do you think that is? How can it be so out there all the time and yet so not discussed?
That's a great observation. So the sexualization, I think I fully agree that mainstream media and mainstream culture is highly sexualized, especially towards the female body. But again, it only goes to a specific degree, to a certain step. It doesn't cross that threshold into actual what porn goes into, which is showing the actual act of sex. So I think because we're hidden and because that last ingredient is so ignored and so um, not really talked about and openly. So I think that again, it leaves those subconscious imprints on our nervous system that this is something to be avoided, a conversation to be avoided, an experience to be avoided.
And then there's, I don't know if you agree or not, but there's also the issue of younger people seeing pornography and thinking that this is how sex is done. And often the sex in pornography is quite demeaning and quite detached from any type of true intimacy. So I'm wondering if you have any thoughts on that, or maybe how it's affected either yourself or some of your study participants.
Absolutely. No, this is one of the reasons why I think that comprehensive or comprehensive sex education is so important to display and demonstrate what the act of sex can be like in terms of its true intimacy and emotional vulnerability and connection that isn't just physical and oftentimes physically aggressive, as most mainstream pornography sort of projects. And so it is a huge challenge that the sexual script that young minds are getting exposure to is mainstream pornography, which, as you said, is void of intimacy. Every person that's going through the journey of either moving away from porn, going abstinent, or reducing the use, whatever it may be, that's an individual journey. I know that for some that decide that, hey, you know what? I just want to be able to relate to porn in a healthier way. There's content that is being created out there that does aim towards demonstrating and displaying the act of lovemaking, the act of sex in terms of its full intimacy, rather than just what is commonly sort of offered or presently offered through mainstream porn. For some, that's the answer. For me personally, I found that it just made sense to move away completely. And I even did experimentation over the course of the first 3 years of abstinence, where there was a very small number of times where I would once every several months experiment to see, I wonder if I'll feel shame and guilt this time. So as a conscious experiment, and every time I'm like, no, it doesn't matter how much distance I've given myself. It doesn't matter what the context of my life is, no matter how much emotional vulnerability and even transparency I have with sharing with a partner that I might have been with, that hey, this is what I did. I'm just experimenting to see if shame and guilt are there. Each time shame and guilt were there. So for me personally, and everyone has their own journey, it made sense that there's nothing for me here. There's nothing for me in this experience. And also this is might be true for many men. When we're disconnected from our bodies and we're disconnected from ourselves, we're not in touch with the subtle emotions, we're not in touch with the subtle sensations that get activated and aroused when we are in intimate connection with a partner. So the only thing that really penetrates through this disconnect is the hyperstimulation and the visual stimulation that porn offers, which is one of the reasons why when people start watching porn, they have to progressively watch more intense porn or something that's new and novel because they have to continue to get that same level of hyperstimulation. Whereas I think when we do the healing work, when we come back to our bodies, when we do heal the trauma and the emotional wounds, things that Gabor Mate's compassionate inquiry approach is so effective at, that all of a sudden we are more connected with all the subtle sensations that it's almost like a full body arousal rather than only essentially being sensitive to or aware of the orgasm, as is the case for some men.